Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask Me Anything App Actions. I'm your host, Jisha, Developer Relations Engineer with Google Assistant, and I'm here with Doug and Adam from the App Actions team. So we're here to answer all your burning questions. So please don't forget to post your questions. Head over to the IO website, click on the Q&A button right next to the live stream video, and we'll be choosing the top voted questions, so make sure to upvote your favorites. So let's get started. Over to Doug and Adam.
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is Doug Stevenson. I am also a developer relations engineer with the App Actions team at Google.
And I'm Adam Coimbra. I'm a product manager on App Actions for the Google Assistant.
All right, let's get started then. Our first question is from Stephanie, and it's, how much work is it to convert my existing app action that uses actions.xml to shortcuts.xml? Doug, do you want to take that?
Yeah, it's not a whole lot of work. You will have to learn the shortcuts.xml file format. Good news is that it already exists in the Android platform, so you can read the Android documentation to learn how to get started with that, and then you can layer in your app actions on top of that. So there's a relatively straightforward process to get your actions from actions.xml into the shortcuts.xml format. You can test it with the App Actions test tool in the exact same way that you were testing it previously, so nothing changes there. It's just a matter of migrating the XML format from one to the other.
Adam, anything you want to add there?
Nope, that's exactly right. And just one thing to say would be that it's a little bit inconvenient, definitely, to have to make the change, and we're sorry for that, but we think it's really well worth it because we're really invested in this API and in the kind of benefits that it creates in Assistant. And as we release more and more features in the roadmap, which we're investing in, they'll be supported in this new format and in this new API, so you'll be able to take advantage of them.
Sounds good. Our next question is from Juan, and it's, how do Android shortcuts get used by Google Assistant? Maybe Adam, you can take a shot at that.
Yeah, my pleasure. So we're really excited about this announcement. As you heard, Android shortcuts, which have been around for a long time, are now going to be a bit more useful for the users of your app, because if you've created shortcuts, or if you create shortcuts, they will now be usable as voice commands in the Assistant. And specifically where we're starting is with the shortcuts gallery in the Assistant. So if you, this is something we announced last year. If you say to your Assistant, hey Google, show my shortcuts, it'll take you to this gallery where you can see all the different shortcuts on your phone that can be set up as voice commands. And now any shortcut created as an Android shortcut will appear and be recommended in that gallery. And your users can set up your shortcuts as voice commands. They can even customize the command that they use. And that's just the beginning. We're excited soon to be seeing more and more features in Assistant based on shortcuts. The one that I'm really excited about that's coming up next is proactive suggestions of shortcuts. So if you use kind of the library that we've released for shortcuts and you do everything in the right way, Assistant will actually be able to proactively recommend your shortcuts to when users come to Assistant. So that's a pretty exciting feature that's coming soon.
Cool. That should help a lot with the discovery, definitely. Right. Our next question is from Bill. That's, how does shortcut in-app promo work, and what are the limitations? Doug, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can say a little bit about that. So the way in-app promo works is there's an SDK that you add to your app, pretty straightforward API. You use it when the user does something in your app that you want to voice accelerate. So if they had just completed some task, you could use it to remind them that they can create a shortcut for that, an Assistant shortcut, which is different than an Android shortcut. And what that does is it clues Assistant into understanding that this is something that the user will want to do again, and that there's a voice query associated with that. So you're constantly reminding people that there is Assistant integration, that they can use voice queries to accelerate some of their tasks. And it handles all of the UI for that. So all you have to do is just basically pop up that reminder to actually create the shortcut, and Assistant will do the rest. And maybe Adam, you have something to add to that. I'm not sure what the limitations are that might be relevant, but I'm sure you have something to say about that.
I'm also, I can say a bit about it in general and speak to some possible limitations. I think the way that it works, maybe from a product or user experience standpoint, like I would just add that we really think that the best time, or one of the best times for users to discover and learn about voice, is in the action, in the moment, when they've just completed a task inside of your app, when they've just ordered that drink or finished that exercise tracking. That at that moment, when they really understand sort of what the action is, to tell them, okay, next time you do this action, say this voice command, like to really take that moment. And that's what in-app promotion lets you do, is to create that in-context discovery with your user and use that perfect moment to both educate and get them a bit invested in this voice experience. So that's just really the benefit. But everything that Doug said is correct about sort of how you do it and how you integrate with it and such. In terms of limitations, I also would have been very curious specifically what what we had in mind there, but some things to watch out for, is that whatever you specify in the API as to what the voice command should be and what the metadata description of the command is, those things will just sort of be faithfully passed over into the assistant UI that asks the user to save it. So please be careful and follow the kinds of best practices that will document as you specify what the user should say. Think about what is the command that a user might really most likely want to use, which might be different than how you would represent it visually in the UI. And also think about the metadata where we describe what the action does and how best to call up to in the user's mind that action that they've done in your app, and understand that this command is going to sort of re-engage with that same action. So just be thoughtful about that, because it will be what you specify will be passed over into the assistant UI and what's presented to the user. Obviously, I think there are some other email ways to reach out about the specific limitations. So please feel free to do that, and we will respond.
Yeah, I think one limitation I do know of is that it requires Android API level 21 or higher. The SDK can be used on lower API levels, but it won't work unless you're on API level, unless the user's on API level 21. So that's something to keep in mind. But API level 21 is pretty old these days, so the vast majority of your users should have support.
All right, sounds good. Our next question is from Sarah. When should widgets be used, and why not just open the app? So, yeah. Adam, do you want to take a
happy to take that one, and Doug, I'll ask you to supplement as always. When should widgets be used? Why not just open the app? So as we begin bringing widgets into the assistant, as we started thinking about that, the opportunity that we really saw with widgets and voice was that as an app developer, there are only certain times when you can engage with your user. The user has to open up their phone, have the phone unlocked, and be in a context where they're looking at the screen and they can interact sort of in depth with your app. But that is not all of the contexts where your app might be able to serve your users. There's other cases where a user might be hands-free. Their phone might be locked and it's sort of, they only have one hand and their other hand is busy. They might be in the car. There's all these different contexts where there might be an opportunity or a value that you can bring your users. I'm on the way to pick up some coffee and I want to place the order when I'm on the way, or I'm just putting in headphones and going for a run and I want to start tracking the run without sort of unlocking my phone and whatnot. And this is the vision of the kind of the value that widgets can bring to you as an app developer and to your users. Is that in these contexts where you can't reach users today, widgets is a kind of a portable UI, a portable experience from your app that can come into Assistant, so that Assistant can present it in these sort of voice forward contexts. So there's definitely a time to open the app. This is something that you generally have control over. If it's possible to open the app and that's what you prefer, you can set it up in the API so that it will open the app. But by adding widgets in as well, you can now access these new contexts. So that's generally how we think about it. But Doug, please hop in with your thoughts.
Yeah, I like what you said about voice forward context. I think that's where widgets really shine here, because if the user's interacting with Assistant, they might want to continue to interact with Assistant. It might not just be one query; it might be a series of queries or follow-on queries. And so, if you launch your app, the user's clearly left Assistant and is interacting with your app now. But if you present a widget, then the user stays in Assistant. They get their answer immediately. And widgets also have a text-to-speech option, so you can speak out an answer. So you're staying within this entirely within this voice forward context, which might make sense for queries that just have a simple answer. For other things, like if you want to kick off a task, opening the app makes more sense because you want them to go to completion. Maybe the query is just the beginning of something more. They've begun a journey within your app, so you'd want to launch the app to continue that journey. So widgets are really good for these one-off requests that have spoken responses, immediate answers, and everything else would be good for opening an app.
Yeah. And I think that example of, I guess, Dunkin' Donuts, where you're just reordering your, your drink and so forth. Also, like, I guess repeating a task would be a good example, I guess, for widgets as well.
Yeah, I love the way that both of you said that. It's one way to think about it is this idea of a one shot or a quick answer response, and being able to stay in context and just get that response from within the assistant. And then there's other experiences, other use cases that are more like a session, where you're going to be doing a long running kind of task inside of an app, and there the full app UI can be used. So in an ideal world, whenever the user just wants a quick answer, we'd always have a widget and we could give them the widget. And whenever the user wants to do a more complex task, Assistant could jump you into the right place in that task. And in the ideal world, that's would be a great breakdown to have.
All right. So our next question is from Merle, and let's see, what's the difference between Android intents and built-in intents? Doug, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so you'll probably notice as you read through App Actions documentation, you do encounter two different things that are both called intents, but they're different things. So our documentation should make this clear in every context. So when you're reading about an Android intent, if you're an Android developer, that is exactly what you know it to be, the intents that do things like launch activities, start services, trigger broadcasts, things like that. That's an Android intent. Now, Assistant has another concept that sits adjacent to that called a built-in intent, which is a very different thing. It basically represents sort of a unit of semantic meaning. So a built-in intent represents something that the user wants to do with a voice command. And so all of the parameters of that meaning are sort of baked into these built-in intents. And you can see there's a list of like 60 plus intents, and we're adding new built-in intents all the time. These are not Android intents. These are, again, assistant specific concepts. But when the user does trigger a built-in intent with their voice, that ends up being translated into an actual Android intent that you have to handle within your app. So the built-in intent is effectively encoded inside an Android intent. So when you're reading through the documentation, it should be clear, but it's good to keep in your mind that these are two different things. We hope that is not too intense. That was a play on words.
That was wonderful.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question is from Andrew. And what are the different ways App Actions can hook into my Android app? Adam, maybe that's a good way to talk about it.
So this is a good question. So last year we launched sort of the first part of the answer, which is App Actions API called actions.xml, which allows you to hook up the assistant and voice queries to Android intents, as Doug was just explaining, or deep links in the app. So the way that it's hooking in, so to speak, is by connecting these semantic built-in intents, which represent voice interaction, to your app activities via Android intents via deep links. And this allows these experiences that we have where you say a query like search for coffee shops on Google Maps, and we deep link into Google Maps and we paste coffee shops into the search box. So that's what we launched last year. And as you heard, we are moving to this new capabilities API, but it really is the same fundamental idea of hooking up voice to Android intents. Now, what we've announced, this year at I/O is 2 more ways to that App Actions lets you hook up Assistant and Voice to your app. So the first one is Android shortcuts. So Android shortcuts are also generally, ultimately an Android intent, but they have some different properties that make them quite powerful. And I think the main one that excites me is dynamic shortcuts, which are user specific, and obviously, as the name implies, dynamic. So this means that whereas what we can put in a static file like actions.xml or shortcuts.xml are things that apply to all users, through dynamic shortcuts, Assistant can hook into the specific actions and specific content that users are engaging with in your app. For example, a app like the Android Messages app exports shortcuts for the top contacts that you're chatting with. So those things can then be accessible through voice queries, and those are very unique to you and personal to you, which makes them, we think, more compelling and rich for users. So that is shortcuts as another way to hook in kind of a user-specific Android intent that Assistant can hook into through App Actions. And then the other thing that we announced, as we were discussing before, is widgets. And widgets are another way that Assistant can hook into your app. And in this case, as we described, the widget is sort of a remote UI, so a UI that is presented from outside of the boundaries of your app's activities and can be brought inline into the Assistant's UI. So each of these Android intents and deep links or capabilities, shortcuts and widgets, each of these are the ways, as of now, that that Assistant can hook into your app through App Actions. And yeah, Doug, is there anything that I missed?
No, that was pretty comprehensive. I don't have anything to add.
Cool.
All right. So our next question is from Paul. I think, Doug, you should be able to answer this. How can I test my App Action integration?
Yeah, so so during the Android application development lifecycle, you probably want to be able to cycle very quickly and see if the thing that you wrote, the app action that you integrated, works as you expect. We have tools for that. It's worth noting, though, that in order to kick off that process, you do need to upload your app to the Play console. That right now is a required step. The good news is you don't have to actually publish your app. You just have to upload it to maybe a test track. That upload to the test track lets Google know that you have an app and it has a particular unique application ID. Once we know that application ID, then you can use a Android Studio plugin called the Google Assistant plugin. You can download that just like any other plugin, and it has a tool inside it called the App Actions Test tool. Once you have that installed into Android Studio, you can use it to test trigger your app. So it basically reads your shortcuts.xml, creates what's called a preview on our server. So this preview basically lets your Google user on your device, test the App Actions integration driven through this Google Assistant plugin. So that's how that's basically how you accelerate your testing. So one, you have to have a device or an emulator with your Google account signed in. 2, you have to be signed into Android Studio with that same account. 3, you have to have your account registered to upload that app in the Play console, again, with the same Google account. Once you have all that set up, then that Google account can then be used with the App Actions test tool to test your integration. Then when you're satisfied with how it works, you can publish your app, promote it fully to productions for all of your users to get a hold of it. But you don't have to complete that final step until you're happy with the way your App Actions work using the plugin.
Sounds good. All right. Next question is from Jen, and there isn't a BII for my use case, BII being a built-in intent. What can I do instead? Adam, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad we have a good answer for it, which is that you are not constrained by the set of built-in intents that we have published. Although if we have published a built-in intent, you definitely should use that instead of what I'm about to say. So if there is a built-in intent, please use that. But if not, then instead of waiting for us to publish it, we do support custom intents, and so through custom intents, you can sort of create your own semantic intent that represents that particular use case. Use a string resources file to specify the different possible example query patterns that basically requests that users might say, and tag them where there's a parameter. And from there, it actually looks very, very similar to implementing a built-in intent. So it's the same format of declaration in the shortcuts.xml file. You test it in the same way. Everything is the same, just you were in control of describing the metadata around the intent, and of course the user's potential utterances. And then really the idea is that the Google Assistant will kind of take those example queries that you specified and try to eventually expand them into more queries. This is something that we're relatively early on, but it's something that we are investing in to make your life a bit easier and to make the experience a bit better for your users. I also, one last thought there. I would also encourage you to file a request on our public-facing, issue tracker when there is a built-in intent missing for a use case, because this is how we can capture that feedback and add it to our pipeline. As I mentioned at the beginning, we always prefer to use a built-in intent if at all possible. There's obviously a trade-off where we can't create everything, which is why we introduced custom intents. But if we do see multiple people requesting something, then there is a good chance that we would invest in creating it. So we need to hear that feedback from the community, and I'd encourage you to do that.
Sounds good. All right. Our next question is from David, and it's, so with the new shortcuts.xml capabilities API, when is it best to extend an app action with slices versus extending an app action with an app widget? Is it possible to declare both? And if so, when does one take precedence over the other? So, Doug, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. So if you were an app actions developer prior to Google I/O, and you wanted to do an inline response to a query, kind of like what we were talking about before with widgets, you would have used something called a slice. And so a slice is basically that, just like a widget where you have this bit of remote UI that embeds into the assistant UI. We're basically trying to move away from that. We're moving towards widgets. We find that widgets give an overall more pleasant user experience. The API has been around since forever in Android, so it's something that developers are already familiar with. I would say probably, but you might already have some widgets in your app, and you can maybe repurpose those for the purpose of voice fulfillment. So we're leaning into the widgets API. We're moving away from the slices API, but the slices API isn't going to stop working. That's, if you have a slice already, that's going to keep working. And we don't have any near-term plans to get rid of that. Though I imagine, maybe Adam, you want to say a little bit more about what the future of this is?
Yeah, happy to. So as Doug mentioned, if you've implemented a slice and connected it to the assistant using Actions XML, that will continue to work. If you are considering implementing shortcuts.xml and capabilities, we are not. We're going to support widgets there, and also sort of the improvements we're making in this space. Things like adding TTS outputs, support, which is a great feature of widgets. These things we're focusing more on widgets. Now, the reason for this is as you heard in the Android keynote and throughout, across Google, we are doubling down on widgets, and it just. We believe that it makes most sense to kind of consolidate on one solution for this kind of remote UI presentation inside of Assistant, and widgets is the one that we're all kind of leaning into. That's where we'll be sort of adding new features like TTS output and new UI components and lots of things, like not just for Assistant but also broadly in Android. So highly encourage you to, as I said before, move to shortcuts.xml from Actions XML, implement a widget. But as Doug said, we, totally value the any work that has been done to create a slice before, and it will continue to work and serve users in the assistant.
Sounds good. Widgets for the win. Renee, that's our next. This is probably our last question for the session, so we'll see if we can squeeze in one more. But the question is, can you provide some steps how I can implement with App Actions a shopping list? I know from Dialogflow already how I can create utterances, etc., but the Google Assistant does not recognize my intents since it seems that they collide with your internal system intents for shopping. Can you help?
Yeah, I can start, and then Doug, please chime in. So it's a good question. We actually support built-in intents for lists for App Actions. So there are a set of productivity built-in intents. I believe that the relevant ones here are called create item list, update item list, and get item list, if I am remembering right. And these will actually give you, built-in support for all those same sorts of queries, like, add this, to my list, and and so on and so forth. So you don't, Dialogflow is not actually something that is integrated to App Actions. It's part of the conversational actions experience. But for App Actions, in this case, you can really just really easily set up these productivity built-in intents and connect them into your app, and users will be able to say all those sorts of queries and be deep linked into your app to fulfill the request.
Yeah, I don't. That was pretty good. I don't have anything to add in there. I mean, if we have another question, I think that would be great if we have time for one.
Yeah, let's see. Maybe like one more question.
Sounds good.
All right. So from Russ, we have, does Actions intent open app feature work via Google Assistant now, or just using the testing utility? I haven't gotten it working yet, and I've seen issues posted that haven't had a completed resolution. Doug, do you want to take that?
It should work. I can't think of any reason why. I don't think there's any technical limitations why it wouldn't work. Adam, maybe you can correct me on that, but I think it's just a standard common BII that should work both in the testing tool and for published apps, as long as the trigger phrase matches something that OpenApp feature actually recognizes. So I think that's where some people might sort of go wrong, is that they might use a phrase that the BII doesn't support, and then you might have some problems there. So just to back up, the test tool doesn't work with English language phrases. It works with the contents of the BII. So when you use the test tool, you're actually composing the full BII, sending that off to Assistant, and then letting it know, hey, pretend the user said something that would match this BII. However, when you're doing a voice query, you're actually saying or typing something. Assistant has to then match that, turn that into a BII, then ship that off to your app. So if it's not working with a voice query, it's very possible that the voice query just isn't supported for whatever reason. And since I don't know what your voice query is, it's hard for me to say from here. But that's the first thing I would think of.
Yeah, so I would just add, I'm quite certain that OpenApp feature does work. I know that there's queries like open YouTube history or other partner queries that definitely are working and serving users in production. I know that there was a bug in the testing of OpenApp feature specifically a few months back. I am quite certain that it was resolved. But as Doug mentioned, there are several steps along the way of testing an app action that can lead to problems. So please keep trying, and we'll respond to all those issues raised. But this should be working. And thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing. If you have a very specific case where something isn't working the way you expect, I would encourage you to compose a question on Stack Overflow and be sure to show the actual code and the steps that you're taking that reproduce the problem, so that anyone, including myself, would be able to reproduce it and see what's going on. So it might be something simple, and someone can just point out, hey, you're not doing something right, or what you're doing isn't supported, something along those lines. But if you please do ask us questions if something isn't working the way you expect.
Yeah. All right. So actually, I think we've actually run out of time, and that wraps up our live Q&A. Thank you so much for joining us today for App Actions, and we hope that you learned a little bit about App Actions a little bit more. And we have follow-up resources at developers.google.com/assistant/app. So thank you again. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Adam.